Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Tradies Transformation Hub podcast. And at the same time, we are also recording live on YouTube as well. So actually not live on YouTube, but just recording. So my name, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Angela. My friends call me Lala. I have worked in construction for the past 15 years in Sydney, Australia, and I absolutely love it. Right now, I am a design manager for a construction company, and I work for the aged care division that specialize in constructing aged care facilities. Now, a lot of people may ask, so why do I want to do a podcast? And also, why do I want to be a coach specialized in construction? So outside of my day-to-day, my 9 to 5 or 8 to whatever time it finishes, I am actually a trained coach that specializes in working with men in the construction industry. This is one of my passion, and also my mission is really to reduce the number of statistic basically on suicide rate and mental health prevention. So I really want to, I guess as a contribution piece, I really want to tackle this challenge that we're facing as as an industry at the moment, in terms of suicide rates and the number of our men and women suffering from depression, anxiety, and a whole lot of mental health issues. So I thought it would be quite fitting for our first podcast to talk about the statistic. And I named the heading of this podcast, deconstructing the mental health sort of state in construction. So I thought it would be really fitting to really talk about, okay, so if that's the case, what's the starting point? What's the status quo at the moment? And I just thought, being episode 1, it's probably a good thing to set the scene. And let's talk about, 1, what's the statistic? And 2, why are we so special as an industry? The contributing factors, and what are we going to do about it? As important as it is to talk about the challenges that we're facing and the issues, I believe it's also equally as important to talk about, what are we doing? What are sort of the strategies? What are we doing as an industry as well? I think that's quite important. So that's what we're going to cover in the podcast today. So statistic-wise, I think the most sort of the biggest volume of study that has been done is done by an organization called Mates in Construction. They started in Queensland and are now getting really popular also in Sydney. A lot of larger companies and corporates are actually supporters of Mates in Construction, really because of what they do, and it's all about spreading the message. So if we go on to Mates in Construction website, what you'll see is roughly between 260 and 270 men commit suicide in construction each year. Now that's a large number, because if you then consider, quite often people talk about it in the media, in mainstream, about how unsafe construction is. We talk about, work-related accidents or death that's caused by work-related accidents. That's probably only about, a third or a quarter of the number of men committed suicide. So if you look at it, it's death by suicide in our industry is about 3 or 4 times more than death by work-related accidents, which is very significant. I still remember when I first started in the industry, my dad, I would call him, I had this really big pour one day and I was so excited. I rang my dad during the pour, standing on a scaffold, obviously not pouring concrete myself. And he was like, what are you doing up there? It's so dangerous. Just be really careful. But if you really think about it, maybe what we should be more concerned about is the mental health. And when we make phone calls, when we talk to our mates, it's not so much about be careful on site. It's more about, hey mate, how are you? How are you feeling? How have you been? How's things? And that's really what Mates in Construction is all about, giving us the tools so we can ask those seemingly easy but actually quite tough questions. So for me, my sort of journey to really looking into this challenge was back in 2017. In the past, I have suicidal thoughts, but I never, obviously I'm still here, so I haven't, luckily, or I don't know, I wasn't brave enough, or I probably wasn't sort of at that ice tipping point for me to really feel the urge to kill myself. But I definitely went through a period where I had suicidal thoughts. I was living on a 6-story apartment back then, and really all I want to think about on some days when I get home or when I get up in the morning is just like, how easy would it be if I just jump off this balcony and not having to go through, what I thought was the pain and suffering. And I could imagine, that's what all these guys that committed suicide would have thought about. The world would be better off without me, or I just want to end this pain and suffering, and the easiest way is probably to kill myself. So my realization before that point, my realization was that, or my thoughts were, I'm probably the only person. I don't think anyone will ever understand what I'm going through, and so you hide it. But on the Monday before Christmas 2017, a colleague of mine actually committed suicide. Now, I don't know this person really well, but I've worked with him on a project prior. And to me, he's like the most humble and kind and gentle person that I know. And yet, that happened to him. So he's got a brilliant career ahead of him. He was promoted to a project manager not long ago, only recently, well, before he committed suicide, but only recently been engaged with, a long-term girlfriend. So he's got an amazing life ahead of him. So this news came as a shock for everybody, basically. And that was the day when I had my aha moment. And I realized, wow, actually, I'm not alone. So I started looking into all the statistic about suicide, about mental health in construction. Also, the other thing about our mental health in our industry is also 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 men in our industry, or person basically, could at some stage in their life, or would have at some stage life, and in any given time, we're looking at 1 in 5 in the room would have some sort of mental health challenges. So if you see me keep looking down, if you on YouTube at the moment, I just have to make some notes just in case I forget. Otherwise, I quite often go into a bit of a tantrum. So, with all these statistics in mind, we know we've got mates in construction, and there are some amazing corporates out there that are starting to support the mental health space of their client. Why is it though? Why is it the suicide rate is so high in construction? We have about 1 million population, so about 1 million men and women that works in construction in Australia, and we're losing 260 to 270 men a year. And this is just my theory, and I'll be so grateful if someone wanted to have a chat and just share your thoughts as well. But here are my top 5 things I think contribute to this current, climate in our industry. So if you think about trade-based, quite often a lot of the tradies, they start their trade practices or apprenticeship in, their late teens. So 16, 17, 18 is when they start their trade apprenticeship. And I believe, when it's still quite young, especially in our society today, and quite often it's a big major sort of switch in terms of, when you're at school, everything is rigid, and there's a process, there's a procedure, there's things that you go through, there's schedules that you go through each day. So there's regularity, and also you have people that helps you, keep you accountable. When you go to a job site, it's quite different, and sometimes it's not as nurturing. I think construction is a very masculine industry. It doesn't mean we beat each other up. No, we don't. But the nurturing is very different to the school system and how we nurture our kids, obviously. So I think it's a big sort of mind shift for many of us. And also it is a bit of a challenge for many of us, or many of the guys that recently get out of school, because you sort of, all of a sudden you have to grow up. you have to step up, you have to grow up and become a man. It's this thing, even when I first started back 15 years ago as a cadet, I just remember my seniors keep telling me, they punch in your face and go, Angela, you have to put your steel cap boots on because you have to be tough in this industry, otherwise people would just not take you seriously. And it's quite hard. It took a bit of adjusting for me. And I think when especially if you never worked before and coming in straight into a full-time job that's 6 days a week and having to deal with those stresses and a complete different mentality, it's quite tough. And you might say, well, how is that different than someone who's going through university and whatnot? And I believe at university, for me anyway, I've gone through and worked a couple of part-time jobs, so that's sort of like the warm-up. You warm up to adulthood, you warm up to having a job, you warm up to how to be a grown-up. But quite often when you start it in the trade base, like I said, starting at 16, 17, 18, it's almost like you have been asked to grow up overnight. So I think that's quite, it could be quite challenging for some young guys out there. So that's number one. Number two, I also think, as an industry, we get paid quite well compared to other industries or compared to, some of the part-time jobs that we might be having when we're at universities or, even when we're in high school. And it's long hours, so you get paid a lot, especially when you work on Saturdays, So what do you do when you're 16, 17, 18, or when you were young? You're living at home and you really haven't got a lot to sort of, a lot of expenses to spend on. Quite often, drug is an issue in our industry. We all know alcohol, gambling, just a lot of what I call numbing devices. So these are the things, when you have the cash, you could easily get hold of them. Well, I don't know how easy it is to get hold of drugs these days. So, but you know what I mean. It's quite easy to get hold of these things and use them as a relaxation tool, or it's a cool tool because people around you might, ask you to go out for a drink on a Friday night or Saturday night after work. And if you don't have, and you haven't learned to develop those skills to set boundaries, set controls, it could get a little bit out of hand. And that's what we're seeing a lot in our industry as well. Addiction in terms of drug, alcohol, gambling, it's quite common. But generally, for me, I don't look at addictions as, addictions, just purely addictions, because quite often, like I said, they're suppression tools. So you need to look at what was the trigger for them to start that habit and what are the things they are trying to suppress. It's no different to food addiction, where you're trying to suppress things by eating. Cigarettes, another thing actually, I forgot to mention that. So these things are all things that either they calm you down or they numb your feelings, which leads me to the third thing about the tough factor. I mentioned earlier, it's quite a masculine industry still, and there's so much about, being tough and not showing your emotions, not show your weakness, talking about emotions weak. And I know our society keep pushing us and go, men need to talk about the emotions and feelings. It's a fine balance, I believe. Some days you just have to push through, and some days, yes, talking about it does, or express it in some way, does help you release that beach ball, we call beach ball, of emotion that you keep pushing down and suppressing. But quite often we don't have those tools. I don't believe everyone's a talker. Not everyone uses talking as a way of expressing themselves or release how they're feeling, release those negative emotions. So I believe, and this, we're going to talk about it in what we're going to do situation at the end of this podcast, is that we need to look at different ways that show our men or young men how to let it out. Instead of just asking him to talk about it. If this is not a talker, you're asking him to talk about it. That's going to be even more difficult and even more stressful, which then adds to the stress, which triggers anxiety and depression. So let's not do that. And so I think with our industry being a sort of a tough industry where, we're expecting our men to look tough in a way and, keep their own feelings, emotions to themselves, that also has a bit to play. And the other thing is also our long hours. There's a study done in Australia not too long ago. I actually found it on Google. They looked into all the suicide, or actually they get it. I think it was around. Don't correct me on the numbers. I can't remember, but there's either 32. Yes, there were about 32 to 40 something cases of suicide that year. So they took all the samples and they interviewed their family, their colleagues and whatnot, and did a survey basically on the reasons that could potentially, obviously we can't talk to these guys because, they're already dead, but really looked into what was the situation around family, around work, around finances, relationship, leading up to their death. And so what we have discovered was, or in that survey, was actually more than 40% of these case studies that have conducted right before their death, they had either relationship challenges or custody battles with their spouse or other half about kids. So custody battles on child custody, and also relationship challenges were roughly about 41% of the cases were experiencing that. So that's quite significant. And I think a lot of it is contributing to the long hours that we do. I'm lucky enough, I'm an office staff that goes to site, but I quite often work 5 days instead of 6 days. When I work the 6th day, it's by choice. But the guys on site, they work 6 days, and some even work 7 days if they have to push through. So how do you have the mental capacity to then go home and build a relationship and maintain the relationship that you already have with your family, and also be a great dad for your kids? It's difficult, especially when you don't have the tools. It makes it extremely difficult. So there are a couple of organizations, non-profit organizations in Australia, like the Fathering Project is one, which I've learned recently. They have a lot of resources in helping dads become better dads by, just little things that, little changes that will help them build better relationship with their kids and with their family. And it's quite important, right? But, when you work long hours, number one, it's hard to find work-life balance when you work 6 days or even 7 days. But then when you're mentally and physically exhausted, it's harder to build relationship. And this is another thing that I am a big believer in. In order to have quality relationship with other people, we first need to have quality relationship with ourselves. So how do you have the mental capacity when you don't have work-life balance, you don't even have time, for yourself to then build relationship with others around you? So I think relationship is an issue, and that's obviously leading from the long hours of work. And when you're mentally and physically exhausted, it's really hard to keep in a positive mind frame as well. So yeah, a lot of our life challenges, I think, in construction is driven by the long hours. But this last one is actually my absolute favorite, which I'm also a big believer in, is a lot of the guys working in construction are very professionalistic. We spend our days building someone else's dreams, and we want to make sure that we do a great job. You may ask me, how do you know that? So in our company, we do a project startup at the start of each each project, where every single member of the team will sit down and we go through a series of questions about, what do you think is your biggest strength? And so often that's it in the meeting, it's almost guaranteed at least 70% in the room will say my biggest strength is my attention to detail. That is great. But at the same time, Attention to detail is also one of those things that could either make you or break you, right? A person who has the attention to detail will come up with great solutions, great end results, but they also have this constant beat up in their head when it's not perfect. So I think that is also a big contributing factor to the reason why our industry has such a high rate of mental illness and suicide rate. When you're not perfect, what do? You feel like you're letting other people down. So what is the things that you could do to not let people down? And quite often to them, the last resort is, committing suicide, so they're no longer causing pain to other people, which is really sad. And that was one of my reflections when I looked at The Star is Born by Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper. Why did Bradley Cooper kill himself at the end of the movie? Because he was feeling like he was letting people down and it was causing pain to people he really love and cares. So the only way that he could think of, the easiest way to end pain and suffering for everyone else, is to commit suicide. And that is a really sad statistic, right? Which then brings me to, well, so, if we're having such a big issue in terms of, mental health, mental wellness, and suicide in construction, what are we doing about it? And this is why I made this my mission to do all these podcasts and YouTube videos so I can spread the message. I think it's about spreading the message, bring out the awareness, and also giving our guys tools so they could do something about it. And also for me as a coach, it's really sending the awareness and remind people, it's okay to talk about it. Talk to a coach is not a shameful thing. Like, I'm not going to judge you. If anything, by sharing, the famous saying, a problem shared is a problem halved. So by sharing your thoughts, by sharing your concerns, by sharing your challenges with people that you care about, pick people that you care about and you know that they're not going to judge you, to help you, to support you, it's a great thing. Because like I said, a problem shared is a problem halved. And you never know, it might actually help you release some of those weight on your shoulders. So I think we need to build awareness. There's a lot of companies and non-profit organizations out there that's already starting doing that. And I think we just need to, keep going and do a lot more, and share the message and really make our industry a safe place to talk about those things. And that's why I published my book, Armor, as well. So I believe, if it's tough to go and talk to somebody, at least give them the tools that they can look up to. We're all about toolbox. We're all about giving men enough tools and knowledge to do their job. And I think to give them enough mental tools or tools that can help themselves, not just with work, not just with the technical skills, but also the soft skills that allow them to vent and take the weight off their shoulders, is such an important thing. And then obviously, once that becomes a norm, then it will be a lot easier to actually talk about those challenges that we face. And seriously, if you are, having suicidal thoughts, call somebody. I quite often say to anyone who's watching my videos, call me. If you want to get in contact with me, I'm more than happy to help. Just talk to somebody, talk to professionals, talk to friends and family. Just make sure you pick the right people, pick people who actually really care about you and that's not going to judge you, because then you feel safe, then you can really express how you feel and be authentic about it. So this is episode 1. Oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm not quite sure what the sound quality is going to come up, but obviously being episode 1, there's a bit of teething issues that we're trying to resolve, and really all I want is to give you guys enough information and tools out there to support you. We're also going to have different, I'm not just going to talk about mental health issues, but we're going to talk about, things that will help you at work, business and life, just like our heading says. And really let's support each other in our space. We don't often connect enough in the construction industry, and I really hope through all these platforms we can connect with each other more and more, and just help support each other in, either the technical sense or the mental health space or even the soft skills space. And that's what I really hope to do. and just bringing you guys plenty of value and support you guys out there. If you have any questions, you can always email me on angela@angelawayne.com.au, and I will be here to help and support you. I hope you enjoy our episode 1, and I will speak to you all next time very soon. Talk to you soon. Bye. Have a lovely day. Bye bye.